Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Building on what we had talked about at our partner summit, we wanted to put together a webinar when it was available, and we are going to be talking about some ways to customize your disaster recovery solutions today with Green Cloud and Veeam. So a little bit of housekeeping. We will have questions addressed at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions to the Q&A tool. Those will be gathered and will be answered at the end of the webinar. Number two, for the discount and gift cards, there will be a $15 Amazon gift card awarded to the folks that stay on for the entirety of the webinar. And as well, for all Q3 Veeam DR deals, Green Cloud will cover the first 5 Veeam licensing fees with that. And then for the folks that are the call-in users, right now we show 7 call-in users. At the end of the presentation, you'll see Katie Walling's name and her email address. Be sure to send your name to her to receive the gift card and to qualify for the discount. Really easily, it's katie@gogreencloud.com, but we'll also have that at the end of the presentation as well for you guys to jot down. So I'd like to start with a few introductions. My name is John McBride. As you see there, I'm the Director of Product Management. We have Alex Reed, our technical writer. He'll be walking through the architecture as well as doing the demo today. We have JP Phillipson, our Senior VP of Sales, to address any questions that you guys might have in regards to sales and configuration of quotes and things like that, as well as Rance Smith here, our sales engineer, that some of you guys might have had the opportunity to talk with. He'll be helping with some of the questions as well. So as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, at our partner summit, we addressed and talked toward having different tiers available in a business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan, if you will. And what we've had, quite frankly, was a gap in our solution set. We had a continuous data product set through Zerto that addressed the tier 1 high availability needs of our partners and customers' servers. But what we did not have is a tiered approach to where if they had not as critical applications and servers running, did they have a more cost-effective solution to be able to tier that service offering. So what we saw a lot of our partners doing was dropping back their less essential servers to actually a backup as a service product. Now, backup as a service is very essential. It's for the longer term, longer held items that you would use, things for compliance, things that you want to back up and then have in case of any type of legal ramifications that you might need to pull that from, but it's generally not used in a disaster recovery scenario. So we had that product gap, like I mentioned, folks that were using backup as a service and then folks that were using their Zerto on their high need service applications. And so what we're here to talk about today and to demonstrate is that we have a new option to help fill that. So not only can you still use backup as a service for your longer term items for compliance, as we mentioned, you can still use Zerto disaster recovery for your continuous data protection needs. But then we also have an option now that we're going to talk about for Veeam disaster recovery using a replication product that will allow you to have true disaster recovery for those other applications and services, but then also to still meet the need of the tier 1 solutions as well. Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk through the architectural diagram.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, John. So as far as the Veeam DRAS architecture goes, now what we have here is the partner side and then the Green Cloud service provider side. Just to kind of sketch out what happens before provisioning, what we're going to be asking the partners to do before the service is provisioned is to go ahead and have a Veeam backup and replication server set up. If you're not familiar with Veeam, it's a pretty simple install process, but it does need hypervisor access to any virtual machines that you're running. So pre-provisioning is going to be to set up the Veeam server, add those VMs to the Veeam inventory, which is, again, a really simple process. You just direct it right at the vCenter. And then go ahead and create a local repository for those local backup jobs. Green Cloud's recommendation is going to be to have local backups. The backups that are in the cloud are going to be a full separate replica, but having local backups is always going to be a good idea, kind of as a safety valve. So that's the pre-provisioning side. During provisioning, what's going to happen is Green Cloud will provision resources in vCloud Director. They'll provision vCloud storage, which is where the replicas are going to be stored, and then compute and networking resources also from the vCloud Director cluster. During the provisioning process, the partner will use Cloud Connect to connect to the Veeam service provider instance that Green Cloud has provisioned. And then after the service provider is connected, they will go ahead and set up replica jobs that point directly at that vCloud. So the replicas will be stored in vCloud, ready to be spun up in the case of a disaster. So that's how the architecture looks. JP, did you want to go over the pricing and build out for a Veeam DRAS proposal?
Absolutely. So for everybody that is familiar with our disaster recovery products and how we go to market with pricing on those, this is very similar. So it would be just like as you would normally you would log into our portal to build out any client proposals. And then the cost structures look like this. There's going to be a line item on a per licensing charge, and that is a per license per server that you want to protect. Obviously, that would be a Veeam license on our side. Then you can choose to either reserve or choose to not reserve compute and RAM on the target side at the Green Cloud side. And then, of course, we want to find out how much storage is affiliated with the client that you're looking to protect. And then, obviously, that would replicate from their side over to Green Cloud. Now, two other things that you need to make sure that you account for while building that out would be you need to reserve an IP address on our side, as well as we need to look and make sure that you have adequate bandwidth coming out of the data center in order to keep everything in sync. So I'm sure that there'll be questions regarding pricing, so please reach out to your respective channel managers, and we'll be more than happy to assist you with that. Back to you, Alex.
Sure, thanks so much, JP. So now what I will go ahead and do is I'll swap my screen share over to the actual demo for this product. What I'd like to walk through, just for those of you who aren't familiar with the Veeam interface, I'll go ahead and walk through adding Green Cloud as a service provider. Once that's done, I'll show you how you would build out a replication job going into vCloud, and I'll show you what an actual failover will look like. So just to show you the interfaces that we're going to be looking at, where this is the Veeam interface right here, this is Veeam backup and replication. We're also going to be looking at the Cloud Connect portal, which you see here, and we're also going to be looking at vCloud Director. So these are the three screens you'll see me looking at. vCloud Director is going to be where the actual VM lives. You can see it sitting here powered off already. And the Cloud Connect portal is going to be hosted on our side of the service provider tenancy, which means that even if your entire on-premise installation goes down, including your Veeam, you'll still be able to execute your failover plans. So during the provisioning process, one of the first steps is going to be to add Green Cloud as a service provider. That's done through the backup infrastructure interface right here. So we're going to add Green Cloud as a service provider. This is going to be a URL that's delivered to you again during the provisioning process. So these credentials are also going to be delivered during the provisioning process. we're actually only going to have one set of credentials. So you're going to put in, you can see that's the vCloud org, which is just the container for all of the vCloud resources, and then the org administrator account here. So I'm going to enter the credentials there. I'm going to hit apply. It's going to establish a connection to the service provider, and then it's going to add that service provider here. So it picks up all of the resources that have been provisioned to that virtual data center in vCloud. I'm going to save the cloud resources here and then hit finish. So that's the whole, the entire service provider addition process. So once that's done, you have a cloud repository to which you can provision replication jobs. So in order to do that, I'm going to hop over to the replication job screen. Again, we're assuming that the partner already has the VMs added to the Veeam inventory. So the replication job is going to be a really quick adding a virtual machine here. I'm going to give it a name here. I'm going to enable network remapping, and then I'm going to grab my virtual machine. So this is the virtual machine I'm going to grab. At this point, during the replication job provisioning process, we're going to look for our cloud host, which is the service provider that we just added. So I'm going to get my VDC that I just added through the service provider. You can see it picks up a VApp and the default storage policy. So this is just going to dictate the speed at which the storage that the VM is stored on is going to run. You can have multiple storage policies in your VDC. So if you have high performance machines, you can just select your high performance storage policy here. The next step is going to be to add your source and destination networks. So I'm going to grab the source network for this. And then I'm going to grab the target network. So you can see this is the internal network that sits on the virtual data center. During the provisioning process, all of the networking will be built out in vCloud. So we're going to set our job settings next. This repository that I'm seeing here is actually local to this Veeam installation. So this is just going to be that local repository that we mentioned during the architecture overview. Most of the proxy selections should probably be left default. You have the option of enabling application-aware processing. This is just for things like Exchange or SQL that need Veeam to be aware of the application inside the VM in order to truncate logs. And we're going to set the schedule. So the schedule determines the RPO, or the amount of data that's lost between a disaster and the last backup that occurred. So we would have a recommendation of once or twice a day. I'm going to set this to run once a day at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And the reason for that being, you'll see performance impacts if you try to schedule more frequent jobs, although that may be a trade-off that you'd be willing to make. We definitely recommend running some tests just to make sure that backing up more frequently is not going to impact your ability to use the VM. So after we set up the job, we'll see the summary here, and then we'll hit finish. So this is the job that we just set up. I'm actually going to use this job, this identical job that was set up earlier, because this one's already run and the VM is already sitting in our infrastructure. So at this point, your VM is fully protected by Veeam once that first job runs. So the next step is going to be to set up failover plans on your source side. So you can see we already have a few failover plans here. The reason the failover plans are important is because that's the only thing, those are the only things that show up in the Cloud Connect portal. However, if you want to control all of your failovers through the Veeam client, then you can failover directly from a replica. So to create a failover plan, you would create one for vCloud. Going to create one called demo plan, and then you would just add a VM that has a replica existing already. So we would grab this replica right here, add it to this plan, and then you have the option of setting order and boot delay. The reason you would do this is just to make sure that the domain controller would boot up first in a domain situation so that the other servers have the domain controller to talk to and can also grab IPs through DHCP if that's on your domain controller as well. So you can use these up and down arrows to set the order, and you can set the delay for that server. Then you would just hit next and then finish once you have all of the servers added. So once this failover plan is in your source side, I'm going to click over to the Cloud Connect portal. This is, again, the Cloud Connect portal. This is where you would sign in with your provisioned account in order to see your failover plans. You can see your plans as well as your session history. So any past failovers that you've conducted through the portal will show up here. The other side that you'll need to manage is vCloud Director, which is the same interface that we use for our public IaaS. You'll see here I'm in the VMs view for vCloud Director, so I can see the demo server replica that's in the cloud already, waiting to be powered on in case of a failover. This is also the interface through which you would manage your networking and firewall. So in this case, I can go ahead and start the demo plan. I'm going to select Start Now so that it'll go ahead and, let me see if I can re-sign in. Yeah, it's gonna kick me off really quickly. Go ahead and sign back in here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start that plan. We'll wait for it to show up here. Okay, so now this failover plan has started. You can see the demo servers being failed over. It's currently validating the VM. So if I go back to vCloud Director, we'll wait for it to power on here. So you can see that server's powering on now as the failover continues. Yep, so now Veeam knows it's powering on the VM. And now the server's showing is powered on. So if I can pull up this console here, you see Windows is starting up. And now we have a running server. So at this point, you would log into your server, verify any kind of domain problems or anything like that, or domain settings that you need to have on that server. You would also verify by going to the virtual data center here that all of your networking is set up. So your edge gateway would need to have outbound networking allowed, and your org VDC networks would all need to have IPs open in order for these VMs to grab IPs. So once that's done, you would verify that your VM has network connectivity and proceed with the rest of your disaster recovery plan. So that's the entire failover process. You can perform these plans from the Cloud Connect portal. You can see now it's been failed over to a state of less than a day ago successfully. And then you can see the VM startup job is finished here. If I go back over to failover plans, I have the option to undo the failover, which would just power off this VM. Or once you're able to get your source Veeam backup and replication installation back up and running, you could also finish the failover to perform a permanent failover, which would put you permanently in the cloud. So that's the entire disaster recovery failover process. That's pretty much all I have to show today for the demo. So I'm going to hop back over to the presentation and open it up to John and JP if you guys have any follow-up, or we can move on to the question section.
Yeah, we actually have quite a few questions coming in. Let me pull a couple from the chat here and then address them. First one was asking about a mix of Zerto and Veeam. And basically, yeah, to reiterate that, we anticipate that a lot of our customers now will utilize actually all three different products depending upon the scenario of their customers. As I mentioned, for their tier 1 needs, they would continue to use Zerto. For their tier 2 needs that are trying to utilize a disaster recovery product, they would use a mix of Veeam with Zerto. And then for backup items, they would continue to use Veeam backup as a service. There was a question in regards to Hyper-V at the customer site. So the same with our Zerto product. This is just for VMware, not Hyper-V at this time. And then there was an additional question about pairing this with Azure backend storage. We would see that as a competing product with that. So I mean, the customer would be free to obviously do anything, but we would see this as an alternative product to that, utilizing Veeam to control this. And I guess that would be the same. We got another question about a backup AWS instances using AWS S3 storage. That would be something that they could do on their own, but we would consider that competitive to this. A lot of questions rolling in here. So I think there was a question about the how often the replication jobs are being set. Alex, did you want to touch on that? Just about the recommendation via the testing on how often they're replicated? Sure.
So our recommendation would be 1 to 2 times a day, just to prevent any performance impacts. You could probably perform backups as frequently as once an hour without seeing that much performance drop. I think that there's been some recommendations flying around for as frequently as every 15 minutes, which would be exceptionally frequently. I would imagine you would see a decent amount of VM stun every 15 minutes or so, if that were the case. That, of course, also depends on the applications on the VM and the size of the VM. But the technical answer to the question is that it's fully configurable on the partner side. You can run replication jobs as frequently as you'd like, but our official recommendation is going to be 1 or 2 a day.
So we do have a question here for, do we have any support for two-factor authentication onto vCloud Director? Yeah, we do have support for two-factor in the vCloud. As far as the Veeam Cloud Console, that would be your console that you have locally. So you would have to support that. We wouldn't be the governing factor in that kind of setup. But as far as our vCloud instance that you would connect to, yeah, we can set up two-factor for that.
And then we have another question about, there was another question in regards to works with VMware and not Hyper-V. So let me make a clarification there. So if you look at the literature from Zerto or with Veeam, the product does work with VMware and Hyper-V. The way that Green Cloud has rolled out the product is we support VMware and not Hyper-V at this time. So I want to make that clarification. So you may read literature if you go to the vendors' websites about all the different feature sets and all the different supported items that they have, but just want to make a clarification. The way that we have rolled out the product with our infrastructure is with just VMware. So, and we got a question in regards to, is the pricing now in the portal? And yes, it is. You'll see that, and as JP mentioned, you'll configure it the way that you would any other DRAS service offering with the different components, and then use the Veeam replication license pricing. So there's another one here about the setup. You set up the Veeam and the Green within Veeam and Green Cloud, as Alex demonstrated through the demo, and then talking about the DR plan, and then it asks how do folks test their DR through these tools. You want to reiterate that, Alex, just as I know you mentioned that on the demo.
Sure. So there is a test failover option in the Veeam console. That's what you would use to test your disaster recovery. The test failover is not available through the portal. And the reason for that is if you're using the portal, your source side is probably completely down anyway. Veeam definitely wants to encourage people to do preliminary testing inside the Veeam console. So once you set up your replication job and your failover plan, you have the option to test your failover. What that'll do is it'll just spin up the VM on the destination side, and then it'll perform an IP test. You can also perform a partial failover, which means just failing over one or more VMs from inside your infrastructure, but leaving others behind, and use that in order to test the outbound and inbound networking settings on the firewall in vCloud Director. So that would be kind of a sketch of how you would perform DR testing, is to perform either a test or partial failover, and then use the VM that spins up on the DR end in order to test the rest of the settings.
Now there's a question here about, will an IaaS customer still be able to access the Veeam Cloud Connect portal as well? This is strictly from on-premise to Green Cloud. We don't have a setup currently for Green Cloud to Green Cloud. So for our IaaS customers, as far as replicating from, let's say, one of our Nashville sites to an Atlanta site, we don't have that currently set up just yet.
So I think that rolls into one of the other questions in regards to our service offerings right now in different locations. So our initial rollout is to our Atlanta data center, sort of testing the waters to see how popular the uptake is of the product. And then we have some infrastructure upgrades that we're doing, as well as code upgrades in some other facilities. And we are looking at adding a West Coast target as well. But that timeline will come up a little bit later after we've rolled out this initial deployment in Atlanta. We have a question here, Alex, about what kind of RPO can we deliver with the Veeam replication?
Sure. So RPO is going to be fully configurable by the partner. That's directly related to the scheduling of the backup jobs. So RPO is going to be the amount of data that's lost between when the disaster occurred and whenever the last backup was taken. So for instance, if your backups run at 1 a.m. and a disaster occurs at 2 p.m., then that's 13 hours of data that's not going to be in your disaster recovery image. So if you set your disaster recovery to, or if you set your replication job to run twice a day, every 12 hours, then your RPO will be at max 12 hours. So your replication job schedule determines what your RPO is going to be. Our recommendation is going to be 12 hours. You can probably achieve as low as 1 hour by setting your replication job to run every hour. And just something to keep in mind is making sure that your on-site bandwidth can keep up with pushing those replica images as frequently as they're being generated. So you have both the VM performance to worry about, as well as replicating that image across the WAN. So the official answer is you're looking at about 12 hours, but it could be lower than that with the correct configuration.
We have a really good question, and this kind of is more of what I would call a positioning question for the clients, and there's plenty of them that a lot of our partners have sold backup as a service to. And the question is, how do we position and approach our existing clients that we've sold the backup as a service product to? How do we position the disaster recovery component of Veeam? And I think I would answer it like this. I would definitely address the fact that Veeam backup as a service, that checks the box for moving offsite storage, to a different facility. And it's exactly what it is intended for. It's offsite backup. This product allows you to go and speak to your client about presenting a truly defined service level agreement to go through a restoration in the event of a catastrophic event at the client site. Yes, backup as a service, you can obviously take them through a restoral or through the restore process, but it does not necessarily have any SLA. This has an SLA behind it. So that's how I would position it. Obviously, you want to protect the jobs, but also, for those the servers that obviously are higher up in the food chain, this gives you the opportunity to offer another level of protection there.
Yeah, I want to go back to Alex's last question. Just in regards to some of the nomenclature there. So when we were talking about a continuous data protection product, the only offering that we have for that is going to be through Zerto. The Veeam has scheduled replication jobs. We may have mixed nomenclature of backup jobs, and those are going to be different replication points of when they're sent over. But just to be clear, the Veeam application currently, the way that it's offered from Veeam and from GreenCloud, is not a continuous data product. It is something on their roadmap, but that's not what they're currently delivering, which then allows us to offer it at a different, as I mentioned, tiered model, because the pricing is going to be a little bit more cost effective. A little bit different technology, but what we've heard from our partner base is that they were looking for something like that because not all of their customers had a continuous data protection need, which we were filling with the Zerto application. So this is something that has multiple replication points that are scheduled and compared to a continuous data protection product. So just want to be clear about that. One of the other questions is about POC clients. We are currently looking for some of those as well. If you're interested in that, please reach out to your account manager. We do have some things we're specifically looking for on both sides. So we just want to make sure that that's a good fit for both the partners and customers as well as GreenCloud. So please reach out to them.
I got a question here about support for Veeam issues. That will be provided by GreenCloud. Give us a call or work with us, and if we need Veeam involved, we will reach out to Veeam. But we're a 24-hour support operation here. So email us, give us a call, reach out to our support team. We will be frontline on that. And if we need to get Veeam involved, we will process from there.
And I think that there is a question about API with Veeam and the testing. In the initial rollout, that has not been included within the rollout. We'll be looking at that in the phase 2 portion of the different APIs that we will test for that. And we'll put this one specifically on the list, I think, for Automate for Lab Tech. I think that's all the questions that we have today. As I was asked, this session will be recorded and will be mailed out. And we want to reiterate just some of the housekeeping things. Thank you for everybody that stuck with us and all the valuable questions. That'll help folks that are listening to this as a recording. As I mentioned, the $15 Amazon gift card, as well as the Q3 Veeam DR deals, where we're going to be covering, GreenCloud will be covering the first 5 Veeam licensing fees. That'll be eligible for all the folks that have stayed on. For the call-in users, it looked like we had 8 call-in users for the duration of the webinar. Here's Katie's information once again. So please send your name and to Katie Walling. That's katie@gogreencloud.com. And that'll set you up to get the gift card as well as be eligible for the discount. So once again, from the sales, from marketing, and product management teams here at Green Cloud, we thank you very much for taking time to join this webinar to hear about our new product rollout. We're super excited to get this out into the field. As we mentioned, we see this very valuable in a tiered, customized solution for your DRaaS solution set. And we think that you guys are going to have great success with this, being able to roll this out to your customer base and being able to give them a tiered option that'll really put you guys into the trusted advisor state with them and to help protect them with a secure business continuity plan. Everybody have a great day, good selling, and we'll talk to you soon.